Hello everyone, I am Deeksha Jain and I cleared Civil Services 2018 exam with the 22nd rank and my optional was English Literature. In this video, I will be talking about in detail about how I prepared for the optional and what all one has to do to clear this exam with English Literature. Okay, so the first thing that I want to go to is the sources and the books to refer for this optional. Before doing any books, what I feel is important is to read previous year question papers related to the core texts. Now, once you read the previous year question papers, you will have an idea about what kind of questions UPSC tends to ask in English literature. For this, after reading the question paper, these are the sources that I refer to and which I feel also one should refer. The first and the most important source is the core text. In English literature, we have dramas, poetry and novels and background topics. For the dramas, you have to read the original play. If you have any difficulty in reading Shakespeare because the language is a little archaic, you can also go for online sources like No Fear Shakespeare to see the exact translation so that it is better for you to understand the play. Apart from that, poetry, novels, you have to read the core text and that is very important. While you are reading the text, please make sure that the previous year question papers that you read about that text, you keep those in mind, because then when you read the text, you will know what are the important parts of the text which you should keep in mind. What is your own analysis of the text based on the questions that UPSC tends to ask. Okay, after the core texts are done, and 70% of the preparation is just the core text, I would even say 80%. Everything else is, addition to this. For the background topics, what I did was just Google. So we have background topics like the Elizabethan age or the Jacobean drama. So for this, what you can do is you can just Google these words and you will find multiple sources like your Spark Notes, and you will also find some more literary sources. Just note down 5-10 points about that particular topic and you're good to go. It will be a 10-marker question. And if you're able to put in all those paragraphs and with evidence from the text related to that background topic, then you're good to go. You'll get good marks in that answer. Okay, now the second source that I personally found helpful was introductions to the text. Whenever you buy these texts, there will be different editions. For however many texts you can find a worldview edition, it is very good. The introduction is usually very well written. So what happens, but other introductions are also fine. When you read an introduction, it is usually a person who has done some research on the text and they write about all the aspects of the text in that introduction. So it will give you a good overview. You can also collect critical comments from that introduction. So it is not necessary that you will find an introduction for every text, but for many you will find, and for those texts it will be very useful. Okay, now after the introduction, in introduction, one example that I would like to give. Now the foreword to Kanthapura written by Raja Rao, it is brilliant for that text because it has all the themes of the text and it has very beautiful quotations also that you can use in the answer. And it is very short. It is just 1.5 pages. So it's not a proper introduction, but then it is very useful. So introduction, foreword by the author, all these things you should pay attention to. Okay. After that, you can go for online sources. In online sources, what you can do is you don't have to go too much in detail. So what happens is that when we read a text, there will be certain analysis and understanding that we will have, and that will be the core of our answer. But many times we sort of feel that in a particular area our understanding is lacking. For example, maybe I might feel that in Pride and Prejudice, if I were to get the question that I need to do a feminist analysis of the text, I might feel that I don't have enough number of points, or I still am trying to understand the text. In such cases, you can just type this feminist reading of Pride and Prejudice. You can go to online sources like Lit Charts, Spark Notes, and even more literary sources like JSTOR, and you might find some scholarly articles. Don't spend too much time on it. Just give it one day, 4-5 hours. Note down whatever you can from these articles if it is useful. Build your understanding and then leave it. Whatever notes of like 1.5 pages that you have made is all you're going to require from that. Okay, after the online sources, one more thing I would like to say is that in going to the introduction, there are Norton editions of text also, and the introduction is very heavy. It is the introduction itself is 50 to 80 pages. So please don't go that much in depth. What UPSC requires is your understanding first, and after that if you give a little bit of critical comments, it's all right. And secondly, you won't have the time in UPSC preparation to go into so much depth of every text. So I would say that if you find that something is too lengthy, then avoid it. But if the text is too lengthy, you can't avoid it. The core text has to be read. It is a compulsory thing. Okay. One more source is IGNOU material. So what I found was that Indira Gandhi Open Institute of Learning, for MA, it has many texts which are there in the English literature optional. So for some in which I was looking for some content, for Pride and Prejudice, for example, I was looking for some content. So I went to their website, I downloaded the PDF, I went through it, I made little notes from it, and that was it. It helped me in sort of enhancing my answers. So I found that material to be decent. It is not very good, but then decent will get you decent marks in UPSC also. Now all our sources are done. Now we are talking about the preparation strategy, how to go about the preparation of this paper. Now how I went was, first was to read the previous year questions, then read the core text. The core text is very important. So when you're reading the text, I would always do this. Whichever quotation I think is useful and important, I used to note it down to be used in answers. For example, so in Milton's Pride and Prejudice, if there is a question that do a psychoanalytical reading of Pride and Prejudice, and if you start your answer, or if you use this quotation in the answer from Paradise Lost itself, that the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. This is the core way in which you can understand hell and heaven as just states of mind. So this quotation will be very impactful. So look out for such quotations which are relevant to the answers, and which personally you feel that these are beautiful quotations. And when you use them, it will put a smile on the examiner's face, and it will fetch you extra marks. Okay. Second thing is, so whenever you Google around, please don't go too much in detail. What I used to do was, after reading the text, I would just do a general, I would go to lit charts, I would see if there is somewhere where I'm lacking depth. I would go and Google those things. I did not, compulsively Google everything about every text, because that is not required. Wherever you feel that preparation is required, there you use online sources more. If you feel that the introduction that you have read or the understanding that you have is enough, then it is perfectly fine. Okay, now third thing is answer writing. Answer writing is the most important thing generally for UPSC mains, but also for UPSC optional paper. In English literature, how do you practice answer writing? Firstly, please use previous year questions to practice answer writing, because the major themes that are asked in UPSC are the same. They are being repeated because there are 4-5 themes for each text, and only they keep getting asked in a cyclical manner. So the more you practice, the more you will be prepared for the questions which will come in the exam. Okay, now I wanted to discuss a little bit in detail about answer writing. Firstly, in answer writing, what is important? A good introduction and a good conclusion is always important. In introduction, what you can do is, you can begin by a quotation, you can begin by your own understanding, which is well framed and apt to the question that is being asked, because the introduction has to be bang on the question. Please don't do this, that you in the answer you have just summarized the entire text, that this happened and then this happened, then she said this to this person, because that is not what they are asking. They are asking for your analysis. So the answer has to be analytical and not a summary based answer. Another thing in answer writing is use of quotations, as I mentioned earlier. The more quotations, at least use 3-4 quotations in one answer, it will fetch you at least 4-5 extra marks. I can tell you that much. In answer writing, whenever you make a point, whether it is, for example, if you're making a point that Alexander Pope in The Rape of the Lock satirizes the conventions of the society of that time, then please give evidence of it also. And evidence is what? Evidence is, one is quotations from the text. Two, it is incidents from the text also. If you don't remember the exact quote, you can say that, for example, you can say that cutting the lock of Belinda was also a satire on the way on women and their vanity of during that period of time. So that evidence will act as good as a quotation. You can use a quotation elsewhere where you remember the exact quote. So use evidence to back up your point, because if you just make a point without evidence, then you'll get no marks for it. It will be very vague and very generalized. Okay. Third thing about the answer is that paragraphs should be well connected. It is not a GS paper answer that you can just write in point form and just wait. You can't. The literature answer has to be a cohesive whole. A person must feel that from beginning to end it is one piece, and if there is a good answer, one does not feel it feels so effortless, because you start reading and you end reading and it seems like everything has been said without any effort at all. So that is the way you should judge your answer. If you feel that your answer is becoming abrupt, then try to correct those things. Try to make it more jointed and more wholesome. Okay. The next thing is that language based. In UPSC, the time allotted for a question is very less. I am from an English literature background, and we used to write 8 sheets, like 8 sides of a sheet for the same answer, in which UPSC you will get only 4 sheets, 3 sheets, or even 2 sheets. So the idea is that you have to say all of that, but you have to say it in much fewer words. So how do we do that? First thing is language based. You need to use shorter and more direct sentences. You can't be talking about if you can reach a place directly, please don't take the zigzag route, even though the zigzag route might be more beautiful and more artistic. The more direct and the more to the point you are in the answer, it will be more impactful and you will be able to say much more in your answer. In this regard also, what you can do is that in university what we used to do, that for making one point, we would give multiple evidences from the text. That if I am saying that that Elizabeth is a very strong character, and then I will give one evidence, then 2 evidence, then 3 evidence, just making one point. So that increases the length of the answer. It also shows that you've read the text well. But in UPSC that is not required. You give one good evidence for one point. With this, what will happen is that you will be able to include more points. You will be able to include diverse kind of quotations, diverse kind of evidences, and it will enrich your answer. What you were saying in 8 sides it is possible to actually say it in only 4 sides, but it has to be done very meticulously, and the only way to get there is to practice. The more answer writing you practice, the better your answers will become. And for this, there is a word of caution. Please practice with a timer. Because UPSC will give you 7 minutes for a 10 marker, I think around 14 minutes for a 20 marker. So if you are taking 20 minutes to write a 20 marker answer, then you will not be able to complete the paper. Then it will be pointless, because other answers which you knew, you will not be able to contribute anything to them. The idea is that whenever you practice answers, practice with a timer. Even if the quality goes back, you practice again, and slowly the quality will improve. Another way of doing it is also that you improve the quality first and then try to crunch it in time. But I found the former way to be more useful, because then once you get used to writing in a particular amount of time, then your mind starts working like that. So practicing in a timer is very, very important. The last thing which I found was important for my preparation was making consolidated notes. As I have mentioned earlier also, whenever I read a text, I used to note down the quotations. If I felt that I had a different perspective, a way of looking at the text, then I would also write down my point of view in that paper. Apart from that, I would also mention if I have read some quotation somewhere, some critics' comments, which I feel could be relevant to the answer, something from the introduction or online sources, then I would note all these things down in a piece of paper. Now, what this will lead to is a 4-5 sheet stapled, I used to staple them. So, 4-5 sheets of notes for one text, 2 sides for a background topic. and these can be easily revised. This time we had a 7-day break before the optional paper, and I could go through all my notes for all the texts before the exam. And I can tell you that really helps, because then you feel very refreshed and you feel in control of the exam. And it is easier to remember quotations if you've revised them recently. So do make consolidated notes. It is very useful, and it really helped me a lot. And I think that's it from my side. I personally, I did not take any classes. There are hardly any classes available for English literature. I did all of this on my own. I also got guidance from my mentor, Mr. Gaurav Garg. He's an IRS officer who also cleared on his own with English literature as a background. So it would be good if you can find somebody who can check your answers, because then you can get feedback on that. You can talk to college professors, you can talk to previous year people like me or other people who've cleared with English literature. There are many people. So it would be good if you can find somebody to correct your answers. And that would be all. It is a great optional to have, because the beautiful thing about literature is, number one, it does not feel like studying at all. So if you get bored after 4 days of studying GS, you can just pick up a novel, you can pick up a poet, and you can enjoy yourself and study at the same time. And it is a very beautiful thing. Even to this day, even I don't remember my GS papers that well, but I do remember my literature paper very well, because a lot of love and affection has got into it. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed giving this paper. Thank you so much.